Hello students, today now we will study about the next two agents of pollination, that is hydrophily and ornithophily. So let us look first hydrophily. Hydrophily, it is the transfer of pollen grains to the stigma of another plant which occurs through agency of water. So in this there is a transfer of pollen grain to the stigma of another plant through agency of water. Okay, the water pollinated plants, so there are some properties of the water pollinated plants which are shown there. So pollen grains are long, filamentous, unweightable and can swim under the water. So in this the pollen grains are generally long so that they can come above the water. Filamentous means again having a long filament. Unwettable means generally flowers become wet when you dip in water, but in this the pollen grain is unwettable, means it will not be wet by the water and can swim under the water. So these are the types of pollen which can also swim under the water. Number 2, the male flower gets detached and float on the surface of water. So the male flower gets detached. Detached means the male flower generally gets separated and can float on the surface of water. So when the male flower will get separated and will float on the surface of water, then the female flower will catch it from the surface of the water and will help in fertilization. Number 3, the stigma of the flower is large, sticky and well exposed. So the stigma of such type of flower, water pollinated flowers, are large. They are generally large, sticky and well exposed. Sticky, they have a sticky nature like honey or maybe like sugar syrup, and well exposed. Well exposed means they are visible from above the water. Okay. Next, the pollination by water may occur above or under the surface of water. So in the pollination through water, that is hydrophily, there are two types of pollination occurring. In some flower the pollination is occurring above the water, whereas in some plant the pollination is occurring under the surface of water. It occurs in some aquatic plants. Generally it occurs in aquatic plants like Zostera, Vallisneria and Hydrilla. So here is one example given of Vallisneria. So we will study that. In Vallisneria, male flowers are submerged in water while the female flowers with long stalks float on the water surface. So we are seeing here the male flowers are submerged in the water. Male flowers are generally submerged in the water. This is the male flower. See here written male plant. So this is the male plant. They are generally submerged in the water. Whereas the female flowers with long stalks float on the water surface. So this is the female flower. See, the female flower is floating on the water surface. This is the flower which is floating on the water surface. Okay. When these flowers come in contact with the female flowers, then the pollen grains are shed onto the stigma of female flower. So when these two flowers come in contact, then what happens? Then the female flowers, then the pollen grains are shed onto the stigma of the female flower. So then the pollen grains are coming from here. They are starting to float and then they will be shedded on the stigma of the flower. And thus pollination takes place. In this way, pollination takes place. Okay. So we can see here again I am explaining. This is the male flower, this is the female flower. So male flower generally remains under the water and female flower generally the flower is floating above the water. So what happens when both the plant come in contact, female flower and the male plant, then the pollen grains starts floating on the water. Then the pollen grains are shedded on the stigma of the female flower. The next is the ornithophily. Ornithophily is the pollination by bird. So the pollination that is brought by birds is called ornithophily. So there are some plants in which there is ornithophily, that is pollination by birds, like example bombax, begonia and kanna. Small sunbirds and hummingbirds, while feeding edible pollen and nectar, also perform pollination. So generally the pollination done by birds, the birds are generally small, like hummingbirds, small sunbird, etc. And edible pollen means they can eat the pollen. The pollens are generally eaten by them. And during this process, some pollen grain get attached to the body surface or maybe to the beak, and thus they help in pollination. This attached pollen grain will fall onto the stigma when they will go in another flower, and this will help in pollination. These bird pollinated plants are characterized by, so what are the properties of the bird pollinated plants? Large in size and stout. They are generally large in size and stout. Showy and brightly colored. They are generally showy and brightly colored petals are there. Number 3, floral parts are thick and leathery. Yes, this is the important one. Floral parts are thick and leathery. Thick means they should be, obviously they should be thick, because when a small insect sits on a flower, it doesn't affect. But when a bird will come and sit, so it should be a little thick. The floral parts are generally thick and leathery. Number 4, production of abundant nectar. So there is large production of nectar which is eaten by the birds, and due to the nectar only the birds come to the flowers. Number 5th, production of abundant edible pollen. Yes, there is production of abundant edible pollen, means large number of edible pollens in which the pollens are generally eaten by birds. In plants which are pollinated by bats, some plants are pollinated by birds also. The flower have strong odor to attract the nocturnal birds as they are unable to see at night. So as you know that the bats are unable to see at night, so when the pollination, the flower should have strong odor to attract the bird. Since they are nocturnal, they cannot see at night, so they should have a strong odor which will be attracted by the bats and they can help in pollination. So we have studied about the 4 types of pollination: entomophily, pollination by insect; anemophily, pollination by air; hydrophily, pollination by water; and ornithophily, pollination by bud. In the next video, we will study about fertilization.